The morning sky over Seoul turned dark as massive ships appeared above the city. People stopped walking and pointed upward. Cars pulled over. Children pressed their faces against windows. The alien vessels were huge, bigger than mountains, and they cast shadows that covered entire neighborhoods. Admiral Kwon Dae-ho stood in the underground command center, watching the screens that showed similar scenes across the world. New York, London, Tokyo, Moscow, everywhere. The same giant ships hung in the sky like storm clouds that would never move. "Sir, we're getting a transmission," said Dr. Park Sunmi, the woman who studied alien languages. She had been waiting her whole career for this moment, though she never imagined it would come like this. The main screen flickered, and then they saw it. The first alien they had ever met. It was tall, maybe 8 feet, with 6 arms and skin that glowed with strange patterns. Its voice came through the speakers, speaking in sounds that hurt to hear. Dr. Park worked quickly at her computer, running the alien sounds through translation programs. After a few minutes, she looked up with worry in her eyes. "What does it say?" Admiral Kwon asked. "They call themselves the Valeth Dominion," she said, "and they want us to surrender, all of us. The whole planet." The alien spoke again, and this time the computer was ready. Words appeared on the screen as Dr. Park read them aloud. "People of Earth, we are the Valeth Dominion. We have traveled far across the galaxy, bringing order to chaos. Your world is now part of our empire." General Lee Hyun-woo, a big man with gray hair, slammed his fist on the table. "Like hell it is." The alien continued speaking, and Dr. Park kept translating. "We have conquered 847 worlds. Every species we have met has seen the wisdom of joining us peacefully. You have 72 hours to surrender your governments, your military, and your freedom. If you refuse, we will destroy your cities and take your world by force." Commander Kim So-ra studied the tactical displays showing the alien fleet. The numbers were bad, really bad. Each alien ship was bigger than anything humans had ever built. Their weapons could probably destroy entire cities in seconds. Earth's military was like insects compared to them. "How many ships?" Admiral Kwon asked. "Over 3,000, Commander Kim replied. "Each one is armed with weapons we don't understand." "Sir, if they're telling the truth about conquering 800 worlds, then we're in trouble," finished Captain Nam Ji-ho, a pilot who had just entered the room. But something was strange about his voice. He didn't sound scared. If anything, he sounded almost excited. The alien spoke one more time. "Do not be foolish. Resistance is pointless. We have never lost a war. No species has ever stood against us for more than a few days. Surrender now and your people will be allowed to live as servants. Refuse and you will all die." The transmission ended, leaving the room in silence. Admiral Kwon looked around at his officers. By all logic, they should be preparing to surrender. The aliens had superior numbers, superior technology, and superior experience. Earth didn't stand a chance, but then he noticed something odd. Nobody was talking about surrender. General Lee was already on the phone, calling other military leaders. Commander Kim was working with her staff, planning defensive positions. Captain Nam was grinning like he'd just been invited to the best party of his life. "Sir," said Dr. Park, "I'm picking up communications from the alien ships. They seem confused." "Confused about what?" "About our response. Or lack of one. They're monitoring our news broadcasts, our internet, our government communications. They expected immediate panic, mass evacuations, governments falling apart. Instead, they're seeing something else." Admiral Kwon pulled up news feeds from around the world. She was right. Yes, people were scared. Yes, there was chaos in some places. But there was something else too. In military bases around the world, soldiers were volunteering for dangerous missions. Pilots were lining up to fly fighters against impossible odds. Engineers were working around the clock to turn civilian ships into weapons. And everywhere, people were doing something the aliens probably didn't understand. They were smiling, not happy smiles. Grim smiles. The kind of smiles humans got when someone made the mistake of threatening their home. "Dr. Park, can you tap into more of their communications?" Admiral Kwon asked. She worked at her computer for several minutes. "Got it. They're talking to their command ship." The alien voices came through and the translation appeared on screen. "The humans show no signs of immediate surrender. Perhaps they do not understand the futility of their position," another voice replied. "Impossible. We have demonstrated our superiority. The logical response is submission. All species choose survival over destruction. Not all species, Captain Nam said quietly, still grinning. Admiral Kwan understood. The aliens had made their first mistake. They thought humans were like every other species they had conquered. They thought humans would choose to live as slaves rather than die as free people. They were wrong. "What are your orders, sir?" Commander Kim asked. Admiral Kwan looked around the room one more time. At General Lee, who was already planning defensive strategies. At Dr. Park, who was working to understand the enemy. At Captain Nam, who looked like he couldn't wait to show these aliens what human pilots could do. "We have 72 hours, Admiral Kwan said. "Let's make them count." "But not for surrender preparations, sir?" Commander Kim asked. "The aliens think they know how this ends," Admiral Kwan said. "They think we'll surrender like everyone else. They think humans are logical, that we'll choose the smart option." He paused and looked at the displays showing the massive alien fleet. "Let's show them how wrong they are." General Lee looked up from his phone calls. "All units report ready for defensive operations, sir." "Nobody's asking about surrender terms." "Good," Admiral Kwan said. "Because we're not surrendering. The aliens wanted to meet humanity. Well, they're about to get exactly what they asked for." Outside, the alien ships continued to hover in the sky, waiting for Earth's response. They had done the same thing 847 times before. It had always ended the same way, with the defeated species kneeling before Valeth power. But the aliens didn't understand humans yet. They didn't understand that humans had a saying, "Give me liberty or give me death." They didn't understand that for humans some things were worth more than survival. They were about to learn. While world leaders appeared on television asking for calm, the real work was happening in secret places deep underground. Professor Choi Min-ho hadn't slept in 36 hours. His laboratory, buried beneath a mountain in South Korea, buzzed with activity as he and his team worked on something the aliens would never expect. "How much time do we need?" asked Engineer Yoon Haiwan, wiping sweat from her forehead. She had been modifying equipment that was never meant to work the way they needed it to work. "More than we have," Professor Choi replied. But he kept working anyway. Around them, dozens of other scientists and engineers did the same. They weren't building bombs or guns or shields. They were building something much more dangerous to the alien empire. They were building hope. 3 levels above them, Captain Nam Ji-ho gathered his squadron of pilots in a briefing room. The men and women around the table were the best pilots Earth had, but they all knew the math. The alien fighters were faster, stronger, and better armed than anything humans had ever built. "So why are we all grinning?" asked Lieutenant Park Sang-wook, a young pilot who had never lost a dogfight against another human. "Because," said Flight Officer Lim Yu-jin, checking her gear, "they don't know what they're dealing with." Captain Nam nodded. "The aliens have fought 847 different species, but they've never fought humans. They don't know that we're crazy enough to ram our ships into theirs if that's what it takes to win." "Are we really going to do that?" asked another pilot. "If we have to," Captain Nam said simply. "The question isn't whether we'll win every fight. The question is whether we'll make them pay such a high price that they'll wish they never came here." The pilots looked around the table at each other. They were scared, only an idiot wouldn't be scared. But they were also something else. They were determined. Every person in that room would rather die fighting than live kneeling. Meanwhile, Dr. Park Sun-mi sat in a small room filled with computer screens, listening to alien communications. She had learned their language faster than she had ever learned anything in her life. Fear was a powerful teacher, but so was anger. "Admiral," she said into her headset, "I'm hearing something interesting from the alien command ship." Admiral Kwon Daeho's voice came back through the speakers. "What is it?" "They're confused about something. They keep talking about illogical behavioral patterns and unexpected psychological responses. I think they're seeing our military preparations and they don't understand why we haven't surrendered yet." "What do they think we should be doing?" Dr. Park listened for a few more minutes. "They think our leaders should be fighting each other for the right to surrender first. They think our military should be abandoning their posts. They think our people should be rioting in the streets demanding that the government give up. Instead, they're seeing factory workers volunteering to work extra shifts to build weapons. They're seeing old people donating their life savings to the military. They're seeing children writing letters to soldiers telling them to fight hard." Dr. Park paused. "Admiral, I don't think they've ever seen anything like this before." She was right. In their command ship high above Earth, the Valith leaders were having heated discussions. The tall alien who had delivered the ultimatum, Commander HFY, studied reports from his scout teams with growing confusion. "This makes no sense," he told his advisors. "When we arrived at Zephron Prime, their government surrendered within 6 hours. When we reached the Calorian homeworld, they offered us tribute before we even demanded it. These humans, they act as if they believe they can win. Perhaps they are simply too primitive to understand their situation," suggested another Valith. "No," Commander HFY said. "They have space travel, computers, nuclear weapons. They understand technology. They can see our ships, count our numbers. They know they cannot win. Then why do they continue to prepare for war?" Commander HFY had no answer. Back on Earth, the preparations continued. General Lee Hyun-woo stood in a command center in the United States, coordinating with military leaders from every nation. For the first time in human history, every country on Earth was working together toward the same goal. "Report from the factories," said an aide. "Civilian shipyards in Japan, Germany, and Brazil have converted their production lines. They're turning passenger ships into missile platforms. It won't be pretty, but they'll fight." "What about volunteers?" "More than we can use, sir. We have farmers volunteering to be soldiers, teachers volunteering to fly fighters, doctors volunteering for frontline combat duty. And, sir, we have a problem." "What kind of problem?" "We're running out of uniforms. Too many people want to join the military." General Lee almost smiled at that. In any normal war, running out of uniforms would be a supply issue. In this war, it was a badge of honor. Commander Kim So-ra was having similar experiences at the Naval Command Center. "Sir, we have fishing boats asking to be armed with torpedoes. We have cruise ships volunteering to be used as decoys. We have private yacht owners asking what kind of weapons they can mount on their boats. What do you tell them?" "The truth. That they'll probably die, and then they ask where to sign up." This was the thing the aliens couldn't understand. Humans weren't preparing for war because they thought they would win. They were preparing for war because losing while fighting was better than losing while kneeling. Professor Choi looked up from his work as Engineer Yoon brought him a cup of coffee. "How's the project coming?" she asked. "Almost ready," he said. "1 more day, maybe 2. Will we have that long?" "We'll make the time," she said. "The pilots will give us the time." Above them, Captain Nam was finishing his briefing. "Remember, we're not just fighting for Earth. We're fighting to show the galaxy what humans are like. Every alien ship you damage, every minute you stay in the fight, every time you refuse to surrender, that tells every species in the galaxy that there's another way." "What if we lose?" asked Lieutenant Park. "Then we lose fighting," Captain Nam said. "And maybe that inspires someone else, somewhere else, to keep fighting too." The pilots filed out to their fighters. In a few hours, the alien deadline would expire, and the shooting would start. They knew most of them wouldn't survive the first day. But they also knew something the aliens didn't. Humans didn't fight to win. Humans fought to remain human. Dr. Park intercepted another alien communication. This one made her smile for the first time in days. "Admiral," she called. "You need to hear this, and what is it?" "The aliens just sent a message back to their homeworld. They're asking for instructions on how to deal with a species that won't surrender." Admiral Kwan was quiet for a moment. Then he asked, "What was the response?" "That's just it, sir. Their homeworld doesn't have instructions for this situation. In 847 conquests, it's never come up before." Admiral Kwan smiled too. The aliens had made their second mistake. They had assumed that all intelligent life was like them, logical, calculating, focused on survival above all else. They had never met a species that would choose death over dishonor. They had never met humans. The deadline was almost up. Soon the aliens would attack, and Earth would show them exactly what kind of species they had decided to threaten. It was going to be a very educational experience for the Violith Dominion. The alien attack began exactly 72 hours after their ultimatum, just as they had promised. Beams of energy lanced down from the massive ships hitting military bases around the world. The weapons were precise, designed to destroy key targets while leaving most of the planet intact for occupation. But something went wrong with their plan in the first 5 minutes. Captain Nam, Jiho led the first wave of human fighters up from underground bases. His squadron of 30 pilots flew straight toward the alien fleet in small, fast ships that looked like toys, next to the massive Valith vessels. "Remember the plan. Nam said over the radio. "We're not trying to destroy their ships. We're trying to teach them a lesson." The alien fighters came out to meet them, sleek silver craft that moved faster than anything humans had ever built. Lieutenant Park Sang-wook was the first to engage, his fighter barely avoiding an energy blast that would have vaporized him instantly. "They're fast," he reported. "We're crazy," Flight Officer Lim Yujin replied, diving her fighter straight at an alien ship 3 times her size. "Let's see which one matters more." The Valeth expected the human fighters to break off when they realized how outmatched they were. Every other species had done exactly that, fought for a few minutes, realized they couldn't win, and then retreated to minimize losses. Instead, Lieutenant Park lined up his damaged fighter with an alien destroyer and pushed his engines to full power. "Park, what are you doing?" Captain Nam called. "Teaching them about humans," Park replied calmly, and rammed his ship into the alien vessel's weapon array. The explosion took out both ships, but it also did something else. It created a gap in the alien formation that Flight Officer Lim immediately exploited, leading 3 other human fighters through to attack the command ship's sensors. On the alien command vessel, Commander Vexhai watched the tactical display with growing confusion. Why did that pilot destroy himself? His ship was damaged, but he could have retreated and lived. Perhaps it was an accident, suggested an aide. But even as he said it, they watched another human fighter ram itself into an alien ship and then another. The humans weren't just fighting, they were using their own lives as weapons. "This is unprecedented," Commander Vexhai said. "No species has ever." He was interrupted by reports from the surface. Valeth ground troops had landed in major cities around the world, expecting to face demoralized defenders who would surrender quickly. Instead, they found something else entirely. General Lee Hyun-woo coordinated the ground defense from his bunker, listening to reports from around the globe. Tokyo reports hand-to-hand combat in the streets. The civilians are fighting with kitchen knives and gardening tools. What about New York? Police officers are charging alien positions with nothing but pistols. They know they can't win, but they're not stopping. London? British forces have barricaded themselves in the subway tunnels. They're using the trains as mobile weapon platforms. Each report was the same. Human forces were fighting with weapons that were barely effective against alien technology. But they weren't surrendering. Even worse, from the alien perspective, they weren't even retreating when the situation became hopeless. Commander Kim So-ra led a desperate mission in the Pacific, where a small fleet of human ships was trying to reach an alien vessel that had crashed into the ocean. Her team included fishing boats, Coast Guard cutters, and one luxury yacht whose owner insisted on joining the fight. "We can't possibly take that ship," Corporal Bae Jun-soo pointed out as they approached the massive alien vessel. "We're not trying to take it," Commander Kim replied. "We're trying to get inside and see what makes them tick. That's even more impossible." "Good," said Sergeant Han Dami, checking her weapons. "If it was possible, it wouldn't be worth doing." They reached the alien ship and somehow managed to get inside through a damaged section. The interior was unlike anything humans had ever seen. Corridors that seemed to bend in impossible directions, walls that glowed with their own light, and technology that seemed almost magical. But what they found in the ship's command center was even more surprising than the technology. The aliens were scared, not just concerned or cautious. They were genuinely terrified. Commander Kim watched through a crack in the wall as Valeth officers gestured frantically at displays showing human forces around the world. "They fight without logic," one alien was saying. "They sacrifice themselves for no strategic gain. They continue to resist even when resistance is futile." "Perhaps we underestimated their technology," suggested another. "No," the first alien replied. "Their technology is primitive. But their psychology, this is unlike anything in our database. They appear to prefer death to submission. That's impossible. All intelligent life chooses survival." "Apparently not." Commander Kim activated her radio, whispering to Admiral Kwan back on the surface. "Sir, you're not going to believe this, but I think the aliens are more afraid of us than we are of them." Back in space, the battle continued. Captain Nam had lost his first fighter, but had managed to get to a backup ship. More than half his squadron was gone, but they had achieved something important. They had damaged 3 alien vessels and completely confused the enemy's battle plans. "Sir," Flight Officer Lim reported, "the aliens are pulling back their fighters. Why?" "I think they're trying to figure out what we're doing. Their formations keep breaking apart every time we ram one of their ships. The aliens had never encountered an enemy that used suicide attacks as standard tactics. In their 847 previous conquests, losing a ship was a disaster that forced a retreat. For humans, losing a ship was just another way to damage the enemy. Dr. Park Sun-mi monitored alien communications from her underground bunker, and what she heard made her almost laugh despite the desperate situation. "Admiral," she called, "the aliens are requesting reinforcements." "Already? The battle just started." "That's not the interesting part. They're requesting reinforcements not because they're losing ships, but because they don't understand what they're fighting. Listen to this." She played a recorded alien transmission. "Request immediate strategic consultation. Enemy forces display aberrant behavioral patterns. They appear to value abstract concepts over survival. Standard conquest protocols are ineffective." Admiral Kwan was quiet for a moment. "Dr. Park, what do the aliens call the abstract concepts that we value over survival?" She worked at her computer for a few minutes. "Near as I can tell, sir, they don't have words for them. The concepts of honor, freedom, and sacrifice don't seem to exist in their language. Then we'll have to teach them." The battle raged for 6 more hours. Humans lost ships, soldiers, and civilians, but they achieved something more important than victory. They achieved understanding. The aliens finally began to comprehend that they weren't fighting a normal species. They were fighting humans. Commander Vexhai stood in his command center, looking at casualty reports that made no sense. His forces had superior numbers and technology, but human resistance was actually increasing as the battle went on. Every time his forces destroyed a human position, the remaining humans fought harder. "Commander," reported an aide, "we've intercepted human communications." "What do they say?" "The humans are sharing stories about their battles today. They're telling each other about acts of heroism, about soldiers who died fighting, about impossible victories, and every story seems to make them more willing to fight." Commander Vexhai finally began to understand what they were facing. The humans weren't just defending their planet, they were defending their idea of what it meant to be human, and they would rather die human than live as slaves. For the first time in the history of the Valith Dominion, an enemy had taught them something they didn't want to learn, that some species would choose freedom over survival. The lesson was just beginning. Professor Choi Min-ho and engineer Yoon Hai-won worked through their 3rd night without sleep. Around them, the underground facility hummed with activity as the most important project in human history neared completion. It wasn't a weapon in any traditional sense. It was something far more dangerous to the alien empire. "Final system check," Professor Choi called out. "Communication array online," Yoon replied, wiping exhaustion from her eyes. "Power level stable. We're ready. Are you sure this will work?" asked Admiral Kwan, who had come down to see the project himself. Professor Choi looked at the massive array of transmitters and computers that filled the cavern. "It will work, sir. The question is whether it will matter." "What exactly are we broadcasting?" "Everything," Engineer Yoon said simply. "Every war we've ever fought. Every time humans have chosen to fight impossible odds. Every story of sacrifice, every act of heroism, every moment when humans decided that some things were worth dying for." Admiral Kwan understood. "We're not just talking to the aliens." "No, sir," Professor Choi confirmed. "We're talking to every species in the galaxy that's ever been conquered. We're showing them that there's another way." The broadcast began at dawn Earth time. Powerful transmitters sent humanity's story across the galaxy at faster than light speeds, reaching every world in the Valith Dominion. The message was simple but revolutionary. Species didn't have to choose between conquest and extinction. They could choose resistance. Dr. Park Sun-mi monitored alien communications as the broadcast spread across their empire. What she heard made her call Admiral Kwan immediately. "Sir, we're getting reports from Valith-controlled worlds. Something is happening." "What kind of something?" "Rebellions. The species that were conquered decades or centuries ago are rising up. They're using our broadcast as a rallying cry." Admiral Kwan felt a moment of hope, but Dr. Park wasn't finished. "There's more, sir. The aliens are intercepting the same communications. They know their empire is falling apart. On the main command ship, Commander Vexhai received reports that changed everything. Worlds that had been peacefully subjugated for hundreds of years were suddenly in open revolt. Species that had accepted Valeth rule without question were now fighting with a determination that reminded him uncomfortably of the humans. "How many worlds are in rebellion?" he asked his communications officer. 217 so far, sir. The number keeps growing. What are they using for weapons? Anything they can find, sir. Agricultural equipment, mining tools, their own ships. Just like the humans. Commander Vexhai studied the reports with growing dread. The human broadcast hadn't just inspired rebellion. It had taught the galaxy that the Valeth way wasn't the only way. For 8 centuries, the Dominion had succeeded because subjugated species believed that resistance meant death. Now they knew that surrender might be worse than death. "Sir," another officer reported, "we're receiving a communication from the Calorian system." "What do they want?" "They're demanding independence, sir. The entire species. They say they want to be free or they want to die trying." Commander Vexhai had conquered the Calorians personally 300 years ago. They had surrendered after a single demonstration of Valeth firepower, grateful to be allowed to live as servants. Now they were ready to die as free beings. Back on Earth, the battle had taken a strange turn. Captain Nam Ji-ho found himself leading a mixed squadron of human fighters and ships from newly liberated worlds. A Zephyrian destroyer had arrived that morning, followed by Calorian fighters and even a few small Valeth ships whose crews had defected. "This is Captain Nam to all allied vessels," he said over the radio. "Remember, we're not trying to conquer anybody. We're trying to free everybody." "Understood," came the reply from Commander Keltar, a Zephyrian who had spent 50 years as a slave before today. "My people thank you for showing us the way." Lieutenant Park Sang-wook, flying his 4th fighter of the battle, shook his head in amazement. "Captain, are we winning this thing?" "Better than winning," Captain Nam replied. "We're teaching." Commander Kim Sora had managed not only to survive inside the alien ship, but to establish contact with other human teams who had infiltrated Valeth vessels around the world. What they discovered changed everything. "Admiral," she reported over her radio, "you need to know something about these aliens. They weren't always conquerors." "What do you mean?" "I found their historical records. Thousands of years ago, the Valeth were conquered by another species. They chose surrender over death and eventually they became the conquerors themselves. But they never forgot that first choice." Admiral Kwan was quiet for a long moment. "They're afraid, aren't they? Afraid that if they let anyone resist successfully, their whole empire will fall apart." "Exactly, sir. And sir, it's working. Their empire is falling apart." The reports kept coming. General Lee received word that Valeth ground forces were withdrawing from major cities, not because they were losing battles, but because they were needed to put down rebellions on other worlds. The aliens were facing their first true crisis in 8 centuries. Dr. Park intercepted a communication that made everything clear. It was a message from Commander Vexhai to the Valeth homeworld. "Request immediate strategic guidance. Human resistance has inspired systematic rebellion across the Dominion. Standard pacification protocols are failing. Local populations are displaying human-like behavioral patterns. They appear to prefer freedom to survival." The response from the homeworld was immediate and desperate. "Contain the situation by any means necessary. The survival of the Dominion depends on preventing the spread of human ideology." But it was too late. Professor Choi's broadcast had done its work. Across the galaxy, species that had forgotten what freedom meant were remembering, and they were willing to die for it. Commander Vexhai faced an impossible choice. He could continue the war with Earth, but every day he spent fighting humans was another day for rebellions to spread. He could withdraw and try to save his crumbling empire, but that would prove to the galaxy that humans could make the mighty Valeth retreat, or he could try something that no Valeth commander had ever done before. Late that night, Earth received an unprecedented communication. Commander Vexhai was requesting direct talks with human leaders. Not to demand surrender, to discuss terms. Admiral Kwan, General Lee, and Commander Kim gathered in the command center to hear the aliens' message. Dr. Park provided translation as Commander Vexhai spoke. "People of Earth, your resistance has created complications throughout our empire. We are prepared to discuss acceptable terms for ending this conflict." General Lee laughed bitterly. "Now they want to negotiate? After trying to conquer us?" But Admiral Kwan held up his hand for silence. When he spoke, his words were broadcast not just to the Valeth commander, but to every world in the galaxy that was listening. Commander Vexhai, Admiral Quan said, "We don't want to negotiate with conquerors. We want to teach you something that your empire has forgotten. What do you wish to teach us? That freedom isn't something you give or take. It's something you choose. And once a species chooses to be free, no empire in the galaxy is strong enough to make them slaves again." Commander Vexhai was silent for a long time. When he finally spoke, his words carried the weight of 8 centuries of empire. "What do you propose?" Admiral Quan smiled. "We propose you learn what it means to be free. All of you, the revolution had begun. The war ended not with a battle, but with a choice. 6 months after the first Valeth ships appeared over Earth, Commander Vexhai stood in what used to be his command center, but now served a different purpose entirely. The massive ship hung in orbit over Earth, but instead of preparing for conquest, it was preparing for something that had never happened in galactic history: voluntary surrender by the conquerors. Admiral Quan De Ho walked through the corridors of the alien ship, accompanied by Dr. Park Sunmi and Captain Nam Ji Ho. The Valeth crew members they passed no longer looked like masters of the galaxy. They looked like beings who were learning for the first time in centuries what it meant to be uncertain. "The reports from across the galaxy keep coming," Dr. Park said, reading from her tablet. 412 worlds have declared independence from the Valeth Dominion. Most of the Valeth military has joined them. "What about the ones who haven't?" Admiral Quan asked. "They're asking for asylum," Captain Nam said with amazement still in his voice. "The Valeth who don't want to fight anymore are asking Earth to protect them from their own empire." They reached the command center, where Commander Vexhai waited with a small group of his officers. The alien leader looked different than he had 6 months ago. The arrogance was gone, replaced by something that looked almost like humility. "Admiral Quan," Commander Vexhai said, "the transformation you have brought to our galaxy is unprecedented." "We didn't bring transformation," Admiral Quan replied. "We just showed everyone what they already had, the right to choose." "Yes," Commander Vexhai said quietly. "We had forgotten that such a right existed." Through the ship's viewports, they could see an incredible sight. Ships from dozens of species orbited Earth, but they weren't there as conquerors or even as allies in the traditional sense. They were there as students learning from humanity how to build something that had never existed before: a galactic civilization based on cooperation instead of conquest. "Commander Kim," Sora's voice came over the communication system. "Admiral, the first session of the Galactic Freedom Council is ready to begin." Admiral Quan looked at Commander Vexhai. "Are you ready for this?" "No," the alien replied honestly. "But we have learned from humans that being ready is less important than being willing." They made their way to what had once been the ship's war room, but was now serving as a meeting place for representatives from across the galaxy. Species that had been enemies for centuries sat at the same table, working together to build something new. Engineer Yoon Hai-wan was there, representing Earth's technical advisors. Professor Choi Min-ho sat with the communications specialists who were working to establish networks between free worlds. But the most remarkable sight was at the head of the table. General Lee Hyun-woo sat next to a Zephyrian commander who had once been his enemy. Commander Kim worked with a Kalorian engineer who had been a slave just months before. And most surprising of all, Lieutenant Park Sang-wook was training former Valeth pilots in what he called the human approach to aerial combat. "What exactly is the human approach?" asked Pilot Zekon, a young Valeth who had defected early in the rebellion. Lieutenant Park grinned. "Simple. You fight like your freedom matters more than your life. But how do you know when to take such risks?" "Easy," said Flight Officer Lim Yu-jin, joining the conversation. "When someone tries to make you kneel, you know it's time to stand up and fight no matter what it costs." The formal sessions were important, but the real work was happening in conversations like these. Humans weren't teaching other species how to use specific weapons or tactics. They were teaching them how to think like free beings. Dr. Park monitored communications from across the galaxy, translating updates for the Council. "The hegemony of worlds has voted to dissolve itself and join the new confederation," she reported. "The Stellar Republic is asking for human advisors to help them establish democratic government." "What about resistance?" Admiral Quan asked. "There must be some Valeth who want to fight to keep their empire." Commander Vexhai answered that question. There are some, yes. But they face a problem they have never encountered before, which is, they cannot find anyone willing to be conquered. Every species in the galaxy now knows that resistance is possible. Even if they defeat the rebels on one world, 3 more worlds declare independence. The old way is finished. Captain Nam looked around the room at representatives from dozens of species. So what happens now? Do we all just go home and hope for the best? No, said Admiral Kwan. We do something harder than fighting. We build. Over the following months, that's exactly what they did. The Galactic Freedom Council established new rules for how species would interact. No more conquest. No more forced submission. Instead, they created something unprecedented. A galactic community based on mutual respect and voluntary cooperation. But the real change was deeper than politics. Commander Kim led joint training exercises where former enemies learned to work together. Professor Choi established communication networks that let isolated worlds call for help if they needed it. Engineer Yoon worked with alien scientists to develop new technologies that benefited everyone, instead of just the strongest. Most importantly, humans established the first Galactic Defense Academy on Earth, where beings from across the galaxy came to learn not just military tactics, but something more important, how to live free. Commander Vexhai became one of the first alien instructors at the Academy. His classes were always full, because he taught something that only a former conqueror could teach, how to recognize the signs of tyranny and how to stop it before it started. The most important lesson humans taught us, he told his students, is that freedom is not a gift that can be given or taken away. It is a choice that must be made every day. 1 year after the first alien ships had appeared over Earth, Admiral Kwan stood in the same underground command center where it had all started. But now, instead of preparing for war, they were coordinating peaceful missions to help former Valith colonies establish their own governments. Dr. Park looked up from her communications console. Admiral, we just received a message from the edge of the galaxy. It's from a species we've never heard of before, the Korvathi Empire. They're asking for our help. What kind of help? They want to know how to fight an invasion. Apparently, there's another conquering empire out there, one that makes the Valith look peaceful. The Korvathi have heard about Earth and they want to learn the human way. Admiral Kwan smiled the same smile that had confused the Valith so many months ago. Well then, I guess we'd better teach them. General Lee looked up from his planning tables. Teaching the galaxy to fight for freedom. I never thought I'd live to see something like this. Neither did I, Admiral Kwan admitted. But that's the thing about humans, we don't fight to see the future we expect. We fight to create the future we choose. Captain Nam's voice came over the speakers from the academy above. Admiral, the new class of interstellar pilots is ready for their final exercise. They want to know what the mission parameters are. Admiral Kwan thought for a moment, then spoke words that would echo across the galaxy. Tell them their mission is simple. Protect the free, teach the enslaved, and never, ever kneel. Outside, ships from 100 worlds prepared to carry that message to the stars. The galaxy was learning that there was more to existence than just survival. There was dignity, honor, and freedom. And thanks to one small blue planet, there was hope. The alien dominion that had once seemed unstoppable was now just a memory. In its place stood something new. A galactic community where species chose to work together because they wanted to, not because they had to. Commander Vexhai often reflected on how it had all started. The Valith had demanded Earth's surrender, expecting another easy conquest. Instead, they had discovered something they didn't even know existed, a species that would rather die free than live in chains. The humans had smiled when threatened with extinction, not because they expected to win, but because they knew that some battles were worth fighting regardless of the outcome. The galaxy was still learning that lesson, and humanity was still smiling, teaching anyone who wanted to learn that freedom was always worth the fight.